Ooh. Hi everyone. Greetings. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of The Things You Can't Touch. Thank you for tuning in again to this episode. If you're here for the first time, um, welcome. And if you're not, welcome back. I would like to think and I'd like to hope that you have already subscribed. If you haven't, it says a lot about you. Uh, if you have, thank you for being part of the family. Anyway, let's get into the episode now. Today's episode, I think, is quite similar to the episode that came before it. In its own right, it depends on how you take it, but I haven't even introduced our guest, which is really rude of me. To the left of me is
Hi
Asisa.
guys. Hi. Yeah, my name is Asisa. I do a lot of like writing and like Substack. It's called Her Issue, so definitely check it out. I think you should definitely do that. I'm also on TikTok, which is Her Mind Online, and then my Instagram is just Asisa Kadiri.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that all like above your head in the editing, and I'm gonna
Okay.
also put that in the description box. So if you didn't catch that, look, read it. It's there. Or just go down below and then you'll find it and you'll find her. Her writing is genuinely amazing.
Stop.
If you're
Stop it.
interested in like, how would you describe your writing?
Um, Socio-political
Mm,
musings.
wow.
Yeah. Observations.
And sometimes you tap into poetry.
Yes, occasionally. Okay. I don't know
Occasionally,
if
you
you
could do
guys
that.
want to check out my Medium account too, but I
What
don't.
account is that?
It's I
Ooh,
don't remember the name,
okay.
so it's gonna be there or
Eventually,
in
you just
the.
send that to me and then I can put it in the worries.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Okay, great.
Now, like, it's just time for the nitty gritty, really. The question that I have for you, you don't know the question. And I'm excited to see where you take it. The question is, is inequality intrinsic to
Ooh,
society?
how meaty. Honestly,
Yeah,
ooh, I'm gonna stew on that for like 10 seconds.
absolutely, you should. You can take it in any direction that you want. I have
Hmm.
notes that I'm gonna unpack.
I feel like
Easy,
I
man.
have so much to say about this. There's so
Amazing.
much. Um, oof. Where does one begin? Okay, so I definitely, in the society that we live in,
Yeah,
and in the way that our current society thrives,
yeah,
especially in like a westernized context, like I feel like
yeah.
inequality is definitely intrinsic to
Intrinsic.
society.
Okay.
Not in the way that like I'd conceptualize like my ideal
Mm-hmm.
society, if that makes sense. Like if I was thinking of like utopia, it definitely wouldn't have inequality integral to like its bedrock.
Okay.
But I definitely
That's
think
interesting.
the society that we've cultivated and the one that like we live
Yeah.
in now is definitely, without inequality we wouldn't be where we are, like in so many ways. So yeah, I'm
Okay.
gonna answer yes. So yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Let's find
Yeah.
out if you're gonna like still believe that by the end.
I'm so
I'm not even sure
interested.
where I stand with this one. I think I just looked at your work and I was just like, this is like I want to ask you a question that really really touches deep on the things that you're interested in.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I stand with it. And the conversation is gonna lead me to a conclusion. But what I wanted to start off with is obviously definitions because that's what we usually do.
Mm-hmm.
Just see so that we can be on the same page with the conversation that we're
Yeah, makes
having.
sense.
How do we define society? How do we define inequality as well? Because the way that you spoke about it, you said that your ideal society would
Mm.
be, I'm assuming based on what you said, is like a utopian
Mm.
society, right? That's your ideal. So how does the world that we're living in now differ from the utopia that you're
um
envisioning?
so I guess like with inequality, I guess I'd like
Yeah,
use it as kind of like an umbrella term
yeah.
for like a lot of different other
Mhm,
um marginalizing like
mhm.
structures, if
Okay,
we could like call it that.
got it.
Like
Yeah.
if we're talking about like sexism,
Yes.
racism, and then
Yes.
even within that like colorism,
Yeah.
futurism, like things like those kinds of like structures,
All
like
the isms.
yeah, all the isms, all
Yeah.
the all the isms,
Isms.
and then even you have like homophobia, like
Yeah.
transphobia, and da da da, and I feel like all of those kind of isms like fall under the umbrella term of inequality. But I also do think because they're just so interlinked, it's
Mhm.
definitely hard to have like some without the other.
Yeah.
Like I don't think we'd have like fat phobia, for example, without like anti-blackness, and like
Yeah.
things like that tend to like interlink and are definitely like reliant on each other. So I feel like when we're talking about equality, um, I feel like, and yeah, going back to your actual question,
Yeah.
if I was thinking about like my utopia, I guess it just wouldn't have present like a lot of these isms. How we would get there is a different question, because I'm trying to think of how we would even like begin to reverse
Yeah.
all these things.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking when I asked the question at first. So to me, I don't really want to define society. I just think I want to look at it as a world with people in it. Do you think that if the world was like a blank slate, everyone just existed, and then the world was like kicked into motion, will inequality like occur? Is it a necessity to every single society?
I feel like I've done reading on this for philosophy. Like I feel like there's definitely been something in there. I feel like I'm trying to figure out what the reading was, but it's not coming to my mind. But I'm thinking about like, I feel like there's definitely this debate about whether or not like if left to our own devices, things would still like chaos would still like ensue.
It's given Hobbes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was thinking, and I was like, I don't want to misquote, but
No,
like
this is absolutely up to like what you interpret it to be.
yeah, like I think it's like the state of nature, like that kind of okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm really thinking about it, and I do feel like it's like I'm inclined to say that no, that things wouldn't still result in some form of inequality, but like the evidence in my immediate society, it's like in the context of someone living in like Great Britain, I feel like it's very hard to say that like inequality isn't like something that is like very evident within like human history. But I wouldn't say that it's like intrinsic to human behavior as a whole. Okay. Like I do think we have the capacity for community.
I'm so sorry. What I was gonna say is, so do you think that inequality comes out of the behavior of human beings? That's where the inequality derives from.
I feel like I feel like I'm really trying to think. I'm really trying to think like back as far as I can in like my knowledge, if that makes sense. I feel like inequality definitely feels like it's born out of like ideas of like superiority versus like inferiority, because I'm thinking about like initially I was just kind of thinking like, oh, like inequality is just born out of like, I don't know, like
some things are just not fair.
Some things just aren't fair, or like survival of the fittest, or like whatever. But I do think that it comes from more like the ideas of like who's dominant and who's like supposed to be inferior. Because I was thinking a lot about like capitalism, and I was thinking a lot about,
touched on a point that I was gonna touch on.
I was gonna say that like I feel like if I was thinking about inequality like initially, that's like one of the first things that comes to mind. But even like capitalism as its structure in itself is born out of like certain principles about like who's more deserving and who's more like human, and therefore they're supposed to be like the ones dominating. They're supposed to be ones like,
since you
laboring.
Brought it up, I want to even touch on the concept and the point of like capitalism, in a sense that, okay, let me take it back a little bit, in that when we look at the word inequality, connotations of inequality is like bad, negative, terrible. Is inequality intrinsically bad based on like what we think inequality is? Because my own definition personally of inequality is missing out on an opportunity that could better your quality of life. So that's what I think inequality is. So based on that definition, if you agree with the definition to some degree, if you would like to continue the conversation with that definition, do you think that inequality is intrinsically bad? I repeat my question.
Sorry, could you remind me of the definition just quickly so I can
you can even see it on the screen at the top. I define it as missing out on an opportunity that could better your quality of life.
Interesting. Okay. So sorry, what was the question after that question? After that definition?
Does that mean, because the connotations of inequality
like
is like
typically
bad,
okay,
negative. Is inequality a bad thing? I'm asking that because this is kind of a leading question because I want to ask something after, but I need
Okay.
you to say something first or not say
Yeah.
something.
Well, then, based on that definition,
Yeah.
then definitely, like
Inequality is
definitely,
bad.
yeah. Just because I feel like if like maybe we're not all like destined to like take all the opportunities that like are presented to us or like that are
Mm.
available, it's like enable in just having the like just being recognized as having the right to like pursue the same opportunities as other people.
Yeah.
I feel like is really important because I
To
feel like
begin with.
just to be for everyone to be able to like dip their toe
Yeah. So
is like
everyone
really
should start
crucial.
at the same place in
Yeah,
the race,
yeah.
basically. No one should be.
In if we were talking about like from the very
If
beginning,
society's a blank slate
yeah, 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 then
right now,
yeah,
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 yeah.
then yeah,
Okay, cool. Yes, fair enough. But if we look at I'm not gonna lie and say that I'm well versed in capitalism. I know the ins and outs of how
right.
it works, but we get the gist of it.
Mm.
If we look at that, would you think or would you agree with the notion that capitalism is actually good because it gets people to work harder and
Mm.
inequality is necessary because it allows the world to progress?
So, I feel like this idea that like capitalism like makes people work harder is
Mm,
very specific to a certain group of people who already have like an element of privilege. Like I feel like that
mm,
line or like that kind of feeds into the whole idea of like meritocracy
yeah.
in a sense. Like that whole concept I feel like is only really applicable to like the white middle class, but like even if we're not talking about race, like which even though I feel like we just have to, but
Yeah.
like the middle class in general, I feel like that whole idea that like capitalism makes you work harder is definitely only something that is seen at like that level and like
Mm-hmm.
above. Like I feel like for people who are like born into situations where they're not able to necessarily choose just because of like limited access to education and like all
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of things that just mean that people are just stuck in like cycles of poverty. Like I feel like
Yeah.
in that for like that group of people, which is just becoming the majority, I feel like it's very hard to say like, oh well, like it's just gonna make you work harder. It's just like, well, no, because if capitalism is reliant on there always being people like at the bottom, it's like we're never gonna be at a point where like it's just making everyone progress or making everyone work harder. Like it's a necessary function for it to be like there still has to be like tiers of like wealth and like
Yeah.
access and stuff. So I do think that like yeah, I feel like capitalism. No, it's not. It's not. Wouldn't say it's good. I feel like that is a lot of people's misconception now.
Of the capitalist like
Yeah,
ideology.
yeah.
Yes. Okay, cool. Um, is inequality always economic?
Um,
Like, at its foundation?
core.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because hypothetically, if we just had a barter economy where everyone just traded what they needed and
Mm,
like like just lived on what was just enough for them to live for the day and then move on and then just do that again,
mm.
would there be inequality?
I feel like. Um. I feel like the question of whether inequality is always tied to
Money.
like yeah
Yeah.
money. I feel like that really introduces like the idea of like selfishness like as it exists
Yeah.
in people. Like I feel like when people think of like a bartering society, like we tend
Hmm.
to picture kind of like a lack of selfishness. There's definitely more like
Yeah.
humanity there.
Yeah.
So I feel like inequality, like because like the chase and like the desire for like to hoard wealth and to like have
Hmm.
like money and just to have like more money than other people,
Yeah.
etc. I feel like that breeds a selfishness
Yeah.
that maybe
Yeah.
wouldn't exist without that money
Hmm.
aspect. Like even when we look at like a lot of the atrocities that happen like
Yeah.
around the world, you'll always find that like somewhere along the line there's like money to be found there, or like somewhere along the line there's like
I just have to bring
it's
up
always about the money.
the what's the word? The obvious one,
Mm.
which is colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
What people don't understand, I I believe, because based on the readings and the studying that I've done on the concept of colonialism,
Mm.
it didn't happen because the West thought that they were superior to the rest of the world. It didn't happen because white people thought black people were not good enough. It's not because they thought the people in India, because that was one of the first
Yeah.
places that they went to, were less were lesser than them. It's because they wanted money.
Yeah, I argue if anything it's the opposite.
Really?
It's like you see all these like great nations or like great continents with like all these that are so resource rich, and then you also have people that are able to innovate, and like you have communities where people are more focused on like humanity and like the more like sharing aspect of it all, and you see people have like different spiritualities, like different practices, and a lot of the time it's like, especially with the spirituality thing, it's just more like things that like people in the West like didn't necessarily understand. But I do think it's definitely a thing of like seeing like, okay, these are all these nations and all these places that have all these great resources, and like yeah, like we want to make the money and like we want the resources, but it's like, okay, how do we justify like the enslavement and the denigration of and the colonization of like all these people? Like how do we justify that?
Justify it past, oh, I just want money.
Exactly.
That's where all the other ideas came from, which is just so crazy to me. That's just so interesting. Obviously it's just, there's a bit of a tangent to the question, but like tangents are good. Tangents are fine. That is like, that's what in my head is like, because when I was talking about inequality, we have to think about the different types of inequality, because inequality is not just one thing. It doesn't just manifest in one way. As you mentioned earlier, we have sexism, we have racism, there's homophobia. People get treated differently because of the different ways in which they identify. So when I'm talking about capitalism, okay, without money, would there still be inequality? Probably yes, because there are different ways that inequality manifests
itself.
Unless you argue that all of the inequalities come out of money, but I don't think that's true. Because as we can see,
I wouldn't necessarily.
It's hard.
It is hard because I'm trying to think of like an ism or like a prejudice or like the ism in some way tied to the promise of like economic gain for the like the group that's like oppressing kind of thing. Like I'm trying to think of a way in which like money isn't really tied to it. I'm trying to think, maybe within like, but I was gonna say within sexism, but even now you see like even like feminism is being like repackaged and like being sold to us, like even like through a lot of these like liberal feminist ideals that are coming out now, like the whole like divine feminine concept, and like a lot of those things are just being like rebranded and still sold to us, but it still does breed a lot of inequality. So I feel like, I don't know, it's really hard to separate like wealth and inequality.
I think one example that I wanted to give, but I don't know, how would I describe it as an inequality, or would I describe it as an injustice? Because what I was going to say was like homophobia. Where is the economic gain in that?
Interesting. Very interesting.
Because we can't really use injustice and inequality interchangeably. They're quite different. So that's, to me, it's like, it's not. I think the inequality comes out of the injustice. With that one. And it's like, how did we get there? And if we want to argue, I'm not saying that this is what we are arguing, but this is an argument that we are like, what's the word? Investigating. We're looking at, holding a magnifying glass up to, which is a lot of the inequality, if not all inequality that we see in the world, is based on economic gain and like finance and commerciality. I'm making up words now. If that's the argument that we're basing it off of, when we look at things like, as I said, homophobia, like how does inequality manifest there, if at all?
I guess in the immediate, like if I had to like rack my brain, I can't think of a way in which like wealth is tied to homophobia, but I feel like I
If
don't know if
someone
it's
can, I want to really hear.
that's the
their
thing.
take
I
on
don't know if
that.
this is
That's
presumptuous,
interesting.
but I feel like if I
Yeah,
was to
that's
do
what I
enough
was
investigating, I
thinking.
think it would
Yeah.
only take
Yeah.
a quick
Google's,
Google search
yeah,
to see like
the link.
yeah, like
But for me, I think a lot of it is usually religious.
very interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting.
And then if we go back again, in the West anyway, religion and how, well, Christianity anyway, how Christianity links to wealth and economic gain,
Yeah.
again, is very interesting.
Maybe religion's the bridge.
Maybe the religion is a bridge between the
homophobia
and inequality.
And the inequality. Because yeah, if we're talking about like ways in which people have used certain ideologies to justify what they're doing, like religion is definitely one of those. Like especially Christianity is definitely one of those ideologies that has been used to justify.
I wrote a piece about this. It is the sense that like they used Christianity to justify their infiltration and just like blatant, like, what's the word, like aggressiveness towards, I'm gonna say like Africans, because they used, okay, to justify colonialism to justify that, they said it's because they wanted to evangelize and spread Christianity. But to what extent and to what degree? Because the actions of the colonizers, the actions of the colonizers is like, that's just not, the question of whether it's very Christ-like is a separate conversation. But it's like, that's your justification for like going into different countries and acting the way that you acted and creating a serious dent in history. And it's just like, again, very interesting. And I think that's just the kind of thing that I wanted to just like touch on
with the whole religion aspect, especially like when we're talking about Christianity. I'm really interested, and I feel like this is something I want to do like more investigation on. I'm really interested as to how much of like scripture and how much of like what is still preached is the remnants of ideologies being spread to justify like the enslavement of a people. Like I'm really interested in how much of it is like true religion and how much of it is just ideologies being like under the guise of like religion
has been fabricated
as like a more palatable, like digestible way of like consuming like a narrative. Like I'm really interested in like again, like which came first, like the need to justify something, or whether it's like these are the values and we're just gonna apply it to this situation, kind of thing. But I have to think that I'd suspect it was definitely people coming up with one or two things. Just
and that's a fair take. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was, I made this phrase up, it might exist, but I call it relative inequality. What does that mean to you when I just say that off the bat?
Relative inequality, I understand that as kind of being comparable to like relative deprivation.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
I don't want to get the definition wrong, so just know that I'm not quoting a definition.
Just the general idea.
Tell them. From what I understand, like relative deprivation isn't about necessarily where you stand in the context of wider society. It's more about where you stand in the context of your like immediate circle or your peers. So someone who's middle class might claim that they are like deprived, or like that they're just not that well off, or like that they're just like comfortable and whatnot because they're surrounded by all these people that are a lot wealthier. But in the context of wider society, they're still like pretty high on the like the totem pole, so to speak.
That's interesting.
That's kind of how I picture it. I kind of picture it as being similar to that.
Basically.
Okay.
I think it is, because I think that what you just explained to me, I don't know if it's the same as relative poverty. It might be slightly different.
I feel like that's kind of what I was describing.
Yeah.
I feel like,
okay, so we're on the same page. Okay, cool. I bring that up because it's like, I feel as though people are claiming inequality where inequality is not. based on their standards of inequality
Okay.
and based on their standards of what equal is.
Mm-hmm.
So the example that I thought of was digital inequality.
Mm-hmm.
There are tribes that exist wherever that are quite secluded
Mm-hmm.
and not really part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing their own thing. They're having a great time.
There's an example in my head, and I wonder if you're gonna bring it up.
I probably won't because I don't have like a pinpointed example.
Okay.
So you can definitely like link it.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is, some people will argue that that's inequality. It's not fair. They don't have like the digital, you know, access that everyone else have. They don't have phones. They don't have internet. They don't have electricity. Like it's literally like that's not fair. Let's go over there and help them. And fix it.
Yeah.
And it's like inequality to who?
Yeah.
They never asked.
Like this is your standard. They might
That's
be
by your
content. They
standards.
really might be. Like the example I'm thinking of, there was this. This is kind of last year. This is very much in the midst of like very much like fetishy like ideas about like black and like specifically like people who are native to Africa.
Okay.
Like
Ooh,
it's
child.
very like I noticed a lot of it going around on TikTok.
Yeah.
And like it's really interesting to me because this whole like okay, so that was this guy. He was literally, it was just a video of him. I think he was like eating chocolate or something.
Oh my god!
You probably have seen this.
Yes.
Yeah, like he's just sitting there like eating his chocolate, just like looking at the camera, and like initially just saw comments of people just saying like, oh, like you should model which is an interesting conversation in
and of itself.
Yes. But there were just a lot of comments saying like, he doesn't even look human. Like he just looks godlike. Oh my god, I've never seen anybody who just looks this exotic, this different, this special, this not human before. And it was very interesting because in the effort to kind of like, well, in theory, kind of like uplift like black people, it's kind of like you're still finding a way to like give the implication of like non-humanity.
Oh my gosh, we were having this conversation.
Yeah, like it was definitely a time. It was definitely really, really interesting, but I feel like, I can't remember what. I think you asked me a question, and then I went on a tangent.
Tangents are good. What did I ask? I think we're just talking around the conversation of relative inequality, if it exists, some way it means. Basically. So,
with that, like, so I think one of the comments that stuck out to me was someone said kind of like, oh, like, get this guy out of. I didn't even. Bear in mind, they didn't specify where in Africa, not at all. But they just said like, oh, like get this guy out of Africa and just get him into a modeling agency kind of thing. Yeah. And number one,
that's just so.
The stories that I'm hearing about like trafficking and like but like number two, it's like the thing that you said. It's a very like interventionist perspective.
Oh, that's a good
like,
word.
My friend taught me that word.
That's good.
Thanks,
shout out to your friend.
Thanks, Maria, for teaching me that word. But yeah, like I think it's like a really interesting perspective because it very much says, and these aren't even the people that are like the head of society. These are just like everyday people living in the West with this perspective.
I'm trying to think of the word. Like interventionist really like touches on it. There's a word that I'm thinking of.
I'm so curious.
It's like not. It's not that you're audacious. It's like you're very like. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's not privileged. You're
entitlement.
Like, thank you.
Is that the word?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad.
You're entitled.
Yeah.
Why?
Like it's so.
Why are you projecting your ideals on other people because you think that yours is the best?
I just think.
Get this
like
guy out of Africa.
Yeah, like I'm just. First of all, have you been like to any of the countries? Like
why though?
And like
the crux of the question is like why though?
Because like first of all, there's definitely this idea here that like just the whole like African mud hut perspective of just like, oh well, look at them, poor them, like they're all just living in dirt and they have no food, they have no water, like kind of thing. So there's that perspective which like but like even outside of that, even in a scenario where someone is living in a far more like natural state, like if they are living in like so-called mud huts and stuff, which from like what I've actually learned, like people have managed to still have like sewer systems, like people have still managed to have like a lot of these like very like necessities, like things that we'd say we need kind of thing, like even within that context of like it's just not so like industrialized
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so it's just really interesting to me when people have that perspective, because it's like, what makes you think that the way you're living is preferable?
Yeah, that's the
Like,
word. Why is not
yeah,
even like not that it's better? Why is it preferable?
yeah.
I could be like so happy with what I'm doing right now. Leave me
Like,
alone.
this economy, like, it's not looking good. Like, the
Yeah,
majority of young people can't even like dream of buying a house. So like
yeah,
the idea of like living off of the land, or like having like more natural resources available, or like figuring out a way that you're not so dependent on
mm,
like finances, on like money, like it actually is, it's like a much smarter way of living. Like, it
mm,
makes you a lot more free in a sense, because like in this country, like if you don't make like upwards of like 50K, some people even saying like 70K, because I'm pretty
at
sure that
this
puts you in like
point.
the top bracket, I
Yeah,
think, in the UK. Like, if you're not making up to that amount of money, people are just saying like, okay, well, good luck to you,
yeah, you're not gonna
because
be living
yeah, like that doesn't seem preferable to me, like
at all.
conceptually, like that doesn't
I
seem
want to
like
be
what.
somewhere else.
Yeah, like if there was, and I'm not gonna say that like I'm not sitting here enjoying like certain privileges of
Yeah,
living in a
yeah,
society that's so
absolutely.
industrialized, even
Yeah,
though there are a lot of like societies in like the global south that are very, very much industrialized, and we're just not aware of it over here, kind of thing. But even in a context of where I was made to live a lot more like raw and like natural, and not so like tech and like commercial, and just so like, I feel like that's not necessarily a worse way of living. Like, I don't know, I feel like this idea that it is like, it's just very damaging.
that just made me think about something. What you were saying, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Mm.
Mm. This it was even Elizabeth that made me rethink because I feel like okay, when I first heard about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I was like, yeah, this is so good, this is amazing,
Mm.
yeah, like everyone should have these basic human rights. It's like it's a
Mm.
necessity that everyone should have this, um, and it was just like no,
Yeah.
because like I don't know how to explain it, but what some people think is a necessity is different to what others think is a
Yeah.
necessity, especially when you like look across the globe.
Mm.
It's just not the same. I think the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is just very heavily westernized and dominated
Mm-hmm.
by ideologies that people think is better
Mm-hmm.
because it is from the West.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like not only how did we get there, but what does that mean for something like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Is it possible to have that, or is that just a way of creating inequality in and of itself?
Well, I feel like some anything that's like universal, I feel like is a problem,
Wow.
because there's just a lot of diversity
Yeah.
amongst human nature, like
Hmm.
within human history. There's just so much diversity that it's so hard to put like a universal stamp on anything. And also, when we consider where that universal standard is coming from, like, it's not like
Hmm.
all of the leaders of all of the countries got around and sat on a table
Yeah.
and said
And
like, these are the
decided.
it's like it's still a very specific group of people deciding what should
Yeah.
be universal. And then also, they're always just gonna be violating these universal human rights anyway.
Anyway.
So it just seems like more of a way of
Yeah.
controlling a narrative,
Yeah.
rather than actually something to abide by, and
Mm,
b, that's something that's actually gonna be applicable to like everyone.
that was good.
Thank you.
I liked that.
Thanks.
Because at some point, someone, I don't know where I read it or where I watched it, which is really bad. So, like, people could just ignore what I'm about to say. But someone said, like, a phone should become, like, a necessity.
Mm.
Like, yeah, I'm talking about the right thing.
Yeah.
Like, food, water, shelter,
Okay.
and phone.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
I feel like it's interesting, because in the way that we like imagine phones as being like a very negative facet of our lives, like mental
Hmm.
health wise, and
Yeah.
like even the ways in which like especially like impressionable people, like younger kids, are like
Yeah.
exposed to a lot of things that they shouldn't be, and the ways in which like phones are used to like access a bunch of things you wouldn't like, because before, like, I guess like way back when, you would have needed to be like in the tech field to even have access to like the internet, or to be like
Yeah,
on computers
that's
and stuff,
very
but we literally
true.
have half of it at our
Like our
fingertips,
fingertips.
which is like, it's a lot of power to
Yes.
give like each individual. Like, it's a lot of power, and I think it does breed a lot of arrogance, like having all this access. But at the same time, I feel like I feel like I feel like as far as being able to like spread awareness and being able to have a voice in the conversation, like phones are important, especially with like in the context of apps like TikTok. Like I feel like, you know, like the TikTok ban
Yeah.
in the US and how it's like, I think it's like approaching the Senate. I don't know if it's passed or whatever, but I know that
I
it's
wouldn't
up
know.
there. I know that it's up there anyway, kind of thing. Like they're really thinking about passing it, and I do feel like things like that, like the threat of like policies or like laws like that being introduced does make me feel like the idea of like everyone potentially having access to an app like TikTok, which they're so clearly trying to like shut down for like obvious reasons, of like censorship and like whatnot. Like I feel like the idea of like everyone having access to being able to like have a platform or like being able to see people with different perspectives is like extremely important, because like now like I can have a debate online with someone that I'm just never even gonna meet. Like
In your life.
that's so interesting, and it definitely breeds like a lot more discussion, and like the amount of discourse on that app is just it's like so like obviously you just had it on like Twitter and like stuff like that, but like there's only so far you can go with like a comment section. Like having like a space where it's so easy to just like have conversations and to also see like footage of like everything going on in the world, it does keep people a lot more like aware, like awake kind of thing. So I definitely think in theory like phones are like bad, like when we think of phones it's like get off your phone kind of thing, but in terms of like if we're thinking about equality, like I can see why the argument to like for everyone to have phones is important. Maybe I'd argue that everyone have phones or like no one have phones, but that's just never going to be the case.
Yeah.
So I would think that like it'd be nice for everyone to have like the ability, even if they would choose to opt out, like to have the ability to like to like have that access and stuff.
What you just said was really interesting. You said it can't be either of the extremes. It can't everyone have or no one have. Which is why I think I spoke about the relativity of inequality a bit, in that is there ever going to be a point in which inequality just doesn't exist? And this can be even on a minute scale.
I'm trying to think of like, I think about this a lot because you know when you just look at like everything going on and it does feel hopeless.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of times where I sit there wondering like, okay, will this ever not be a problem? Like will inequality never exist kind of thing? And I do think it's like I'm trying to think of ways that we're seeing it disappear, like because I feel like that can like give me hope. I think for example like gender expression I think is one way that we're seeing it actually like erode, which is really 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 interesting. Like I feel like that's one of the main ways in which I'm seeing like, okay, like there's actually like it doesn't feel like there's as much like pushback as if we were to say like, oh, let's erase class inequality. Like I feel like there are little things that we're slowly like managing to like tackle or like conquer. And obviously I think with the whole gender expression conversation you have to just take into account that like it just isn't as easy for everyone. Like someone who's white like going through a change in like gender expression is definitely gonna have more privileges and gonna be more accepted into that space than like a black person doing it. Like if you're like a black trans woman, that's not like an easy thing just because there's other people that are like managing to like get through the door kind of thing. So I do think that like maybe if I had to like think of one, maybe that's one of the ways in which I'm seeing kind of like the barriers like slowly being broken down. But I don't know. I think that might be a bit naive. Also,
Fairs.
Yeah.
Understand. I think where my mind was going was like, okay, let's look at world poverty. Let's say that all these people who are living below the poverty line become above it. Let's just assume that they're now above it. There's still going to be that range in mad rich people and average people, and then everyone above the poverty line. Does the poverty line now shift?
Yeah.
So there's always gonna be people who are in poverty, basically.
I think when you just have like, because I'll have this conversation like with my parents or like other people who have this idea of like this pro capitalistic like
Yeah.
vision, and then they'll always say like, well, the capitalism we're living now isn't true capitalism, like kind of thing. Like people like that, like it's very interesting to
Yeah.
me, because I feel like what a lot of people tend to miss out or like conveniently forget is like, in order to have these really really rich people, like that is reliant on there being extremely poor people. So even if you have a society where like the poverty line has just shifted and in theory everyone's moved out of poverty, but you're just gonna like, there's like it's kind of hard to escape poverty if there's always going to be inequality, like even within like a richer society or like a society in which we've moved past like our current poverty line, but there's still going to be a new one introduced, because it's necessary not in order for like, in order to have all these really wealthy people, you need to have people that are doing all the work, like at the end of the day, like so I feel like it's yeah.
Because I just find that so interesting, because like when are we just gonna be, not when are we gonna be content, but like what is inequality? Is it really inequality anymore if people, I guess that's a question of what is poverty actually, because if people are living, everyone is living comfortably, but some people are just living more comfortably than other people, is that still people in a state of poverty? Relatively yes, but like by definition, are they really in poverty? Is that really inequality now? But this is just hypothetical. And whether the world is going to get to that point is a question for another day. But yeah, hypothetically, if we are in that position,
this is really interesting when we like, because what we were talking about before in terms of like relative inequality and stuff like that, because like you said, like theoretically, okay, everyone's living in a position where like maybe everyone isn't living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe everyone's actually like
very comfortable
in like what we conceive now as like being like middle class / upper middle class kind of thing. So it's like, okay, are they really like in poverty?
And like the only differences will be, well, the question of triviality is going to come in a minute, but the only differences will be like trivial differences in that you have a Mercedes Benz and you have a Toyota. You have a car and you don't. You, I don't know, you have £100 and you have 1,000, and it's like I guess the economics are going to come into the chat and start saying that, because somebody must have said, if the richest man in the world gave everybody 10k, like we will get rid of world poverty. And obviously the economic students are going to come in and give us a real breakdown of how that's just like not plausible, and how that's just not going to work, because prices are just going to increase and everyone's still going to be in the exact same position that they were in the beginning. But hypothetically, if everyone did like just start with the same amount of money, some people had more money, and everyone was able to have everything that they needed to live, because the issue with poverty is the fact that, again, referring back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, poverty is like you don't have food, water, shelter, you don't have the things that you need to basically like stay alive and maintain like a comfortable lifestyle. If everybody did have those things, is poverty still there and is inequality still there, or is it just you have something and you don't, and that's not fair?
Well, I feel like inequality is definitely still there. Even if poverty isn't there in like the traditional sense, in the way that like our society has found a way to like continuously reward the people at the top. Like I just think that even if we found a way to like reorganize the structure in the sense of like, oh, there aren't people living in like actual poverty kind of thing, even if we found a way to do that, the gap is just gonna naturally widen once again. Like if we have a way of like revering like the richest people and like always rewarding like nepo babies and like all these people who are already in the line of like wealth and succession anyway, it's like these gaps are always just gonna increase, they're always gonna widen. So even if you have people that maybe like they can afford food and they can afford to feed their families and they aren't living in like actual poverty, it's like, okay, the inability to access the same opportunities, like because you were talking about like how your definition is like reliant on the idea of like having opportunities. You're still gonna have people that have way less opportunities
than others, and that is unequal, basically.
So even though it's not poverty, it's like
it's inequality still, regardless. I think in my head there was like a really really like, what's the word, is it stringent, is that the word? No, there was a really like rigid definition of inequality in my head, in which some
Right.
people have to really be suffering and other people don't. And like
Okay.
inequality can still persist, which is leading on to the next thing that I wanted to say,
Mm.
in like just like triviality, like
Yeah.
the trivial things, that's still like not fair, that's still unequal. But
Mm.
again, back to the original question, is it intrinsic to society? Like, is it okay? That's just fine for
Um.
it to be, for there to be inequalities in that some people
Right.
have a car and
Mm.
others just don't.
Like, in the trivial sense, like in the ideas of just like materialistic things.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, like the car example. Like I feel like, yeah, like maybe that's not like, it's not the most, like, I guess it's not the like the worst idea,
That could,
especially in comparison to where we are now.
yeah.
But I still, I feel like I'm still like skeptical of
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of image, because I just do feel like it's like even it's like even in an example where like it's just like a car thing, or it's just like something really trivial, it's like there's still gonna be like there's still gonna be a goalpost, and there's still gonna be like, even like the people with the Toyota, even if they can drive around,
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's like the car works fine, they're just always gonna be chasing the Mercedes kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's just like any example where you have like inequality, I don't think that, like, even if it's an example where it's something more trivial, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that if there was a way in which we could like work towards
Mm-hmm.
eradicating like inequalities altogether, I think
Yeah.
that'd be like kind of better than the idea of like, oh well, if it's just trivial things, then it's literally fine, because with those trivial
Where
things,
do
I
you
just,
draw the
where do you
line?
draw the line
Yeah.
exactly? Because then it's very easy to say, oh well, you just have a bigger house than me,
Yeah.
you just have 5 bathrooms, and then it
Yeah.
becomes,
And I just have
yeah,
one.
it becomes
Yeah.
actually you have a bathroom and maybe I
You
don't have a
just go to
bathroom,
school
and
and I don't.
exactly,
Yeah.
like, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
schooling used to be such a
Inequality is
privilege. Like,
inequality.
schooling used to be, and it's still definitely a privilege. Like, education is definitely like something that,
It's a huge
it's
privilege
a
when
huge
we think
privilege.
about it like globally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like, even within like this country, like having an education, like not even so long ago, like having an education was such a like, it was just revered for like very, very wealthy people in the first place. So it's just kind of like I don't know, like I just think access is very important, and like
Yeah.
having an example where like everyone is able to access like the same things
Mm-hmm.
is really the only way that I can really see like a way forward. Like if we have like, if we like kind of say, well, like some inequalities just aren't as bad as other inequalities, especially in the way that they all seem to be linked. I feel like it's very hard to kind of, you
That
know.
just reminded me of equity, because the difference between equality and equality is everybody gets the same thing, no matter who you are, everybody can be on the same page with what they receive. And then you said it's about accessibility, and that made me think about equity, in that everybody receives things in accordance to what helps you to be on a platform
Like,
with
yeah,
everyone else. So
yeah.
to put that into context, it's like equality is like black men, black women, white women all get £100. But no, £100 is not the best example. What's a good example of, okay, forget race. Let's say poor person, relatively poor person, mediocrely poor person, and really rich person, they all get £1 billion, because that's equal, right? But that doesn't do anything. That doesn't like champion any sort of change. Equity is what we should be like fighting towards. In that, the poorest people are going to get the most money to put them
Yeah.
on the same level as the people who are the richest.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said that. I just felt like that's just like what came to my mind when you
It feels like
said what you said.
it feels like more of a solution
Okay, yeah.
to like what we're talking about, as
Yeah.
far as like if we're working towards our ideal society. Like I feel like that's where
Yeah.
equity really comes in. And it's really interesting when you have like these like policies like affirmative action, or like what's the term for it in the UK?
I wish I knew.
It might still be affirmative action. It might still be affirmative action.
action.
But when you have like policies or like ideas like that, it's very, very interesting when you see who's trying to kind of like play devil's advocate for the other side of like, oh well, that's not fair to all of the white people who still have very very much easy access to these institutions. It's not fair on them because now you have all these black people and they have to fill a necessary quota to like da 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 da, and it's just gonna make it so easy for them to get into these places. But it's like it's just making it up for like the recognition of like bias and also just lost time of like not letting these people have all this access to these things. And I feel like with education, that conversation is like definitely so like we can really see that play out. I feel like
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I have one more thing to say.
okay.
It's like, gosh, it might be a really wild statement,
Oh,
which is why I left it to the end. This might be a really really wild. Is inequality just a result of natural selection? In that, are most white Christian men at the top of the social and economic hierarchy simply because they are genuinely superior according to natural selection?
I was having this conversation with my dad a
Wow.
while ago.
Okay.
And like his perspective was very 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 like interesting. It was good actually. He was talking a lot about, I don't want to mistake what he said, but like from what I gathered, it was a lot about more about like who was willing to use violence
Yes.
as a means to an
You're
end.
about to like land on the point that I was gonna make.
Yeah,
Okay, go on.
like as opposed to like being naturally superior. Like we've seen in like the debunking of like early conceptions of race. Like we've seen the debunking of that like other human beings aren't like intrinsically more intelligent, more athletic, etc., than others. Obviously, depending on the race and depending where you live, you're gonna have like different biological advantages. But like generally speaking, like we don't have variability in the sense of like human versus non-human kind of thing. So it's very interesting because it doesn't feel like it's natural selection in the sense of like this category of people is actually dominant to this category of people. It feels more like, okay, which category of people was willing to use violence?
No one should like mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying that white Christian men are the best in the world and they are superior. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, just thinking about it. Let's think outside of the box here. Is it because they were just more willing to do what other people weren't, and therefore they were naturally selected to be deemed as superior in the context of the world that we're living in, because they created the system, and the only reason why was because they were willing to, and they just got there first.
Like I had this reading I had to do for one of my modules. It was about, it's like a book called The Nutmeg Curse, The Nutmeg's Curse by Amitav Ghosh, I think it's by, and he was talking a lot about how like the Dutch, and they were going over to the Bandinese people, and they were very much wanting to like get nutmeg. They were like trying to get all the spices and stuff because they were in like some kind of like spice race kind of thing. And with that, when they met a lot of the native people, like when they came into contact with them, they'd kind of had this presumptuous idea of like them being barbaric, or like this they had this perception of like, well, they're going to use violence kind of thing. So they just came in with like all of this
violence,
force. Like I think one of the quotes was like, oh yeah, like just burn all their houses, just like burn everything and just kill everyone kind of thing. That definitely isn't the exact quote, but it was
they get the gist
something to that effect. And it's very very interesting because you could see that like the way that the native people were operating was very much in the context of like their spirituality and like the values that were intrinsic to them, which were a lot more like peaceful or a lot more passive. And then you just have all these people coming in from Europe, from the Dutch people, like you have all these people coming in and they're just very very focused on conquering, and they're very much focused on resource extraction at any cost. And so I feel like when we're talking about like natural selection, like if we're talking about like who's willing to use violence, like natural selection has definitely managed to cut out a lot of people. But when we're talking about like natural selection in terms of like who's actually like superior, like then I don't think it can be like attributed to natural selection, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it was just a thought that came to my mind. But then on the flip side, could you just argue that is not really natural selection. Maybe you could argue that their behavior was very unnatural and
Yes.
they're just evil,
Very, very
which is
interesting.
why
Yeah.
they like beat us type beat.
Yeah.
Because when I'm thinking about it, is that I was deep in it the other day. This is genuinely because like we've been here for, I don't even know how long we've been here for, but like it's been a hot minute. The only reason why they were able to go, because I studied the Empire in Nigeria.
Mm.
They had so much wealth until they didn't,
Mm-hmm.
and the only reason why they didn't was because they were kind.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody wanted to come in and like they were welcoming. The
Mm.
Africans were, I'm gonna say Africans, but
Mm.
like I'm not sure about the specific countries, but they were welcoming to the West,
Yeah.
even though some of the West came in with brute
Mm-hmm.
force.
Mm-hmm.
But the general, like the general notion of how it happened was that they were welcoming to the West, and they didn't think like they didn't think
They
about the
probably couldn't even begin
possibility.
to, and not even necessarily in a specifically Nigerian context. If we're thinking
Yeah,
about like transatlantic slavery,
yeah, that's exactly what I was
I
thinking.
I am willing to bet that like the whoever was leading at that
Hmm.
time in these native countries, I'm willing to bet that they couldn't have even conceptualize some of the things
Exactly,
that would go
exactly.
on,
That's
like
exactly
the
what I'm
eating of
saying.
people
Yeah,
and like the using of like black people's hairs for like
yeah.
furniture, like
It's
the using of like black
nasty.
teeth for
Like
like
they just
dentures, like
genuinely
all of
couldn't
these
fathom
things,
it. Yeah.
like all of the rape that was going on, all of the
Hmm.
like, yeah, just all of the like atrocities that happened. I feel like that probably wasn't the idea. Like it was probably more of an idea of like, it was probably more of a presumed bartering
Yeah,
kind of like transaction as opposed
yeah,
to like, okay, now that you've welcomed us in, like, we're just gonna kill
yeah,
all of your people and we're
yeah.
just gonna really enslave everyone. Like I feel like, yeah, the whole idea of like kindness being maybe what was the like the
Differentiating factor.
differentiating factor is
Yeah.
definitely very, very interesting. So yeah, definitely like when we're talking about equality, I feel like the abandoning of like Western values in general
Mm.
is very, very important, and to kind of like look at other
That was a good
cultures
sentence.
and to like
Yeah.
maybe like for a lot of us anyway, like revert back to like a lot of the values of our own cultures, and especially in how we perceive like other groups and like perceiving ourselves as being equal as opposed to being like
Yeah.
superior and whatnot.
Wow.
But yeah.
I was gonna ask, is there anything that you wanted to leave off on, but like that was like a really good
Yes.
ending. Unless there's anything else you want to add, I feel as though
I don't
our
think.
time here is
Yeah, I feel like there's nothing more to add. Just abandon those Western principles,
yeah.
and yeah.
I like it. That's good. Amazing. Oh my gosh, that conversation went everywhere,
It really did.
and like I think I really liked it.
Yeah, no,
It was good.
I love a good tangent so
Yeah,
much.
that's the
I
point.
love it.
I think that's the point. My notes are
Yeah.
just here just so that like if there's nothing to talk about, we can have something to
Just we
talk
can
about.
just yap really. We can just
Yeah.
ramble.
Coming from the question and coming to the point at which we ended, it was, I think the journey was good. I think it
Yeah.
was nice.
I
I
think we
hope the
touched
people enjoyed it.
different bases.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I liked that.
Me
Anyway,
too.
yeah. Thank you guys for listening. This has been Asisa. You can drop all of your Instagram, TikTok handles one more time.
I'm guessing is it gonna be up there?
Absolutely. Is there.
Look at
Um
look at the
Make
thing.
sure you follow and engage with her content and read what she's got on her Substack.
I write a lot better than I talk, so
I
in
think you
case.
did amazing.
Okay, thank
I'll be
you.
real. I
We
think you
were
did
saying, in case
amazing.
anything didn't make sense, just read the
Just read
Substack,
it,
and
yeah.
it'll probably explain half of what I'm saying.
Wow.
So, yes, and
Ooh.
thank you for having me. Thanks. I was really
Absolutely.
excited for
I
this.
hope this lived up to your expectations.
It was a really nice conversation. I really enjoyed that.
Me too. Great. Thank you guys. See you in the next episode. Bye.